Well, there's quite a funny story, actually, of how I ended up here today, and I may embarrass someone, but I was here in Edinburgh in February, and I was speaking at the Women in Technology conference, and I'd just flown in from a conference called Lesbians Who Tech. And I was sharing that this was an extraordinary experience for me because there's about 2,000 women in the room, and I couldn't believe that I was actually single at this conference, and it was just unbelievable. Lydia comes up to me afterwards and says, you know, Alan Turing was actually gay. I said, I know. It'd be great to have you along and be involved from an LGBT perspective as well, and also a woman in tech. So it's great to be here, you know, flying the flag on a couple of levels, not just as a woman, but also as a gay tech CEO. And we like to think that diversity is very much part of our fabric at Werkin. The way we hire, the way we build product, the way we market, it's very consistent to who we are. And we have a much bigger kind of focus, and I guess the bit that kind of wakes us up every morning, because when you're an entrepreneur, it certainly cannot be the regular pay. The bit that gets me out of bed is the fact that we actually really believe that we need to fundamentally change the mix of who is running our global organisations. And if we could do that, that is actually going to be quite key to a real positive impact on social, political, and all things economics as well, because so much is actually pushed through the corporate world. I have a background in finance and really, you know, understand the importance of the financial services industry. It is absolutely a framework which is enabling, but I also know if we could actually change some of the decisions and the people making them in these organisations, we could have some radically different outcomes. And we just have to look at some of the crazy stuff that's happened over the last few years as well to kind of justify that. What's really interesting now, though, in the UK is there is a massive move to get this balance right, and I'm going to sort of touch on that in a little moment. But essentially what we are is we are a technology company. We have built a people analytics platform that uses behavioural science to create organisational change. And some of the things we do is look at how we can cut through unconscious bias. So for example, you are hearing my accent now and you're thinking, I think that might be an Australian accent. And I would say to you, you're right. And then you might start thinking, I bet you she likes a drink. And I'd say you'd also be right. And you know, there's things that are kind of programmed into who we are, and they're not necessarily a bad thing. They're just kind of where we've come from and the background we have, and they inform the decisions we make. And sometimes that doesn't always set us up for success or progress. We need to look at how can we actually break through that. So within the technology, we've actually created nudges. So we actually do talk about being nudge technology, where we can prompt and nudge an action. And why that's really important is for all of the training, which is hugely important to understand why things are important, like, say, for example, unconscious bias training, if we're going to go down this theme, and I'm sure probably quite a few of you, if you're working in corporates now, have actually done this training. It's important to understand what it is, but actually very difficult to shift someone's behaviour. But if you can actually nudge and prompt a change, and you can get someone to do something that they wouldn't ordinarily do, it is that action that starts to positively reinforce someone's neural pathways. It's not understanding, it's not a great marketing campaign, it's the true action of that person. So that's very much one of the key things we're focused on with the technology we have and the companies that we are working with. Now, I wanted to kind of touch on Africa. So I have no huge experience in Africa, so I've got to be honest with you. We have absolutely a global vision of what we want to change, and we're working with global companies that have a head office in the UK. But we have started to talk to a couple of these companies about the Middle East and Africa and what we can do with the sites they have there. So where this is interesting, we know that actually smartphone usage has increased. I'm not going to steal Amanda Regan's thunder because, you know, she actually works for the European Space Agency and is talking about all things satellites. And I know that she'll tell you exactly how all of this is happening. Now, whilst we're not focused necessarily on rural communities, and that's hugely important, we're very much focused on those hubs of corporate decision making and looking at how we support a career experience for all individuals in those firms. So that's kind of early days for us, and we are absolutely looking at it. We know also that what's really interesting about Africa is it is mobile first. Extremely exciting given our technology is mobile first in its design. It's sort of certainly the way the world is going because there's less of a jump required now for real behavioural change. 5, 10 years ago, if you were in enterprise technology, it was actually quite a nightmare. You might be 2 to 3 years in a change program, the way you might actually have to implement the technology and then onboard people. Now we can deploy to people's smartphones because most organisations have a bring your own device policy. And it turns out most people, irrelevant of age, creed, gender, can actually use these phones. So hugely exciting to be able to deploy our technology in a way that consumers are already using it. So again, exciting because this is already happening in Africa. From a banking perspective, what's really interesting is it's a lot more susceptible to disruption generally. Now, you've heard today about payments. We've had Steve Kelly talk about what Sage is doing. We also know there's a whole lot of mobile payments happening in the world, but also in Africa. Where this is, again, interesting is this move towards treating employees as if they're consumers. And where we're seeing sort of an interesting side point here is really around even the things like reverse mentoring, where senior levels and executive levels, board levels of financial services organisations have recognised that there's actually some gaps in the knowledge of people at these levels. And the gaps are really around understanding the millennial consumer. In the next few years, we're going to be about a 60% market of millennials. And if we don't have executives and senior people understanding how these consumers actually operate, then we have a fundamental issue to the profits of this organisation. So I think this is really understanding as we see, really key actually, sorry, I should say, as we see this switch towards really treating our employees as if they're consumers and seeing them as a huge area of value for an organisation to tap into. So I touched a little bit before on this. In the UK, there is something called the Women in Finance Financial Services Charter, and that actually came about last year. Basically what they did is everyone knew there were some problems, so they asked Jane Ann Gardia, who's the CEO of Virgin Money, to actually do a review into the industry. And the review was about the role of women in these organisations. Essentially, we know that they're moving into banks, but actually they're not often staying and they're not progressing through to senior levels, let alone board levels, senior levels in the organisation. So this review was done. I mean, the big key takeaway here, if you want to talk about the economics, we know that if we get gender parity right in the UK financial services industry, we're looking at about a 10% uplift in GDP by 2030. Now, that's great, and it's a fantastic number, but some of the challenge with a lot of this stuff is there are a lot of business cases kicking around, okay? There's lots of numbers, there's trillions of value we can unlock if we get gender parity. The real challenge is, how do you move an organisation to start changing its behaviour and actions to truly do this? And that is often the challenge, because we've seen a lot of great things happen. If we look at the UN's campaign, for example, of He for She, fantastic marketing campaign, huge on Twitter. But how do we know that stuff's really happening in the organisation? So the stuff we've looked at is, how do you take something from a campaign and something you've signed up to market, and how do you turn it into measurable action in the organisation? So it's a really fundamental step change as to what people are truly doing. So out of this charter, there's a couple of key findings I just wanted to touch on quickly. First is mentoring programs and active sponsorship. So the charter really says that actually for women to progress, they do need not just mentors, but they need sponsors, active sponsors that open doors for them, that do truly progress them through the organisation. They also need to embrace technology, because technology enables flexible working. Now, flexible working is good for men and women. It's not really a gender thing. You know, I think we've also looked at things like presenteeism in organisation as well, where you're not actually necessarily focused on outcomes, but just being there. And that can be, you know, not beneficial to the organisation. And the third piece is really looking at the measurement. So what does get measured gets done. So what we've also been focused on is ensuring there's a way to truly measure the action, rather than it being an esoteric kind of feedback session at the end of the year, which might be an email to say, yeah, I met with someone for 3 coffees and I think it might have been good. That's really not good enough to say you are actually making change. So the measurement we've got is actually, has it happened or hasn't it? And if it hasn't, will also be remediation to actually help that happen. So really, the technology is about visibility and action. So who that senior leader actually sees and what they then do for that person. So I'm going to give you a very super quick demo, and we're going to do it analog style, because I thought maybe everyone would be sort of high tech today. So what I need is, I need a volunteer. I think I need Ian, actually. Ian's my mate from last night. We had fantastic chats. He's a fabulously evolved man doing amazing investments in Africa. Soon to invest in the gender space, I think. So Ian's going to stand there. He doesn't really
talk to her last night if I'd known this was coming.
He doesn't like the limelight. Now I need someone. I need a young woman. I think, pink jacket, come up here. And your name is?
Lisa.
Alisa?
Just Lisa.
Just Lisa.
Yes.
From?
Edinburgh.
From Edinburgh?
University.
Okay, university. All right, so we're going to pretend that they don't work for their relevant firms. They actually work for the Bank of Hayley. This is a really amazing organisation. And we're one of the largest FTSE 100 banks in the UK. You've probably not heard of us, we're very private.
I like it.
But it is the Bank of Hayley. And at the Bank of Hayley, we've got about 10,000 people working in the UK. We have several different talent programs that we're focused on. We have a graduate program that has great diverse hiring principles. We have a mid-level kind of career focused program. And then we have kind of a senior program that's focused on getting people into the C-level. So this is part of our talent, our graduate program. And Ian is actually, he's one of my top men at the bank. I mean, I cannot cope without this guy. He's the CFO. He is a huge supporter of what we're doing to kind of make talent both feel engaged and also make diverse talent more visible in the organisation. We've recently agreed, him and I, that we're going to sign up to the Women in Finance Charter because actually we believe it's the right thing for our firm. And in doing that, we've made a commitment to our shareholders to say, we're putting a hand up and actually now we're going to be active sponsors of women. So now him and I are chatting and we're like, well, actually, we better do something so we can show we're supporting this. What's going to happen when it comes to our reporting timelines? And Ian says, look, don't worry, Hayley, I've heard about this great technology. It's mobile-led, and it actually will help our senior leaders and managers be active sponsors of women. And I'm like, awesome, what a man. So over to Lisa here. She's on our graduate program. We're going to say she's in technology. She's a fantastic developer. She's quiet, but actually she's going to develop our next payments product that's going to make this bank a lot of money. Now, the problem is, no one actually knows about Lisa yet. Like, she's on the program, we know that she rates really highly academically, but actually, she's not loud, she's not rambunctious, like the CEO of the bank. She's actually quite quiet. But she's on this talent program, which means she's going to get support. Now, luckily, this talent program has some technology around it, which happens to be Werkin. So you both have mobile phones, if you pull them out, imaginary. Okay, so Lisa is based in Edinburgh. And she's part of the core talent team here, the core technology team, I should say. Ian's based in London, but he's a sponsor of the graduate program, okay? He's never actually seen Lisa before. But it happens today, he's flown into Edinburgh for a meeting. Now, as he's flown in and he enters the office building, Ian here gets a little ping to say, hey, Ian, you don't know Lisa yet, but would you actually like to sponsor her for a seat at the table and give her an opportunity to improve her access or visibility? And because you've got a meeting planned with some of your direct reports, you say yes, because you know she's on the program, you know as a firm we want to invest in Lisa. You say yes, the invite goes through, Lisa gets a ping here saying, hey, Lisa, we think you're awesome. Ian would like to invite you along to one of the meetings he's hosting with his peer group. Would you like to join?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so then, this is a very, very simple example. Lisa goes along to the meeting with Ian. They meet. She also gets visibility amongst his peer level, which ordinarily she would not actually get the chance to do it. And this is a way we're looking at cutting through based on real-time actions, real-time feedback, and real-time opportunities. Now, when it comes to the end of the quarter, and Ian and I are chatting, and it's like, well, Ian, what has happened this month around the program? And he says, well, look, Hayley, it's fantastic. I've got all the stuff I've done has actually been recorded. And then we can look at the program for what's happening across the bank for all of our execs, and we've seen a 20% uplift in actually what our leaders are doing for, in this case, high potential women in our organisation. And then all of a sudden we start to have some meaningful data that we can use to report on our Women in Finance Charter. We can report that through the Treasury. You know what? We could even use it with shareholders. And wouldn't we look great from a PR perspective? Because all of a sudden, we're not about a hashtag anymore. We're about real action, and we're happy to share those results. So you can give my people here a big clap.
Well done, Lisa. You've got the job.
So a very, very simple analog example for you to get a sense around how the technology actually works and what we're looking at doing. I had promised Lydia this would be a lightning talk. I'm giving the 2 minutes sign there. God, I've got 2 minutes to go. I'm done. So there's nothing else from me. Open for questions, I think, if you want us on a panel or, over to the panel and around later on if anyone wants to know anything. We also run a CSR program, which is kind of the first in its world, in the world, generally, that I know of, but, would welcome any others, where we will support not-for-profits who have a mentoring or career development program in place that have a gender or LGBT focus in what they do. We'll work with you for 6 to 12 months to help you get the program in place to help progress the talent in those programs. So if you run one of those organisations and want to chat to us about that, I'm more than happy to as well. Thank you.